Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, I would like to pay a tribute to some of Africa's great sons. And Chinua Achebe is one of those great sons. I think many Africans, at least in sub Saharan Africa, have read some of his works. And one of the reasons why it appealed so much is that he was writing a story of something that many of us could relate to in their in their daily lives as an African. And some of his ideas have allowed us to look at life in a different way and to massage the mind to think differently. He has said so many really interesting things that have stuck with many of us the rest of our lives. Some of us have read some of his books, and I'll be the first one to admit that I've read some of his books repeatedly just because I found them interesting and insightful. For those of you who have not read any of his work, I would strongly recommend that you do. Things like Things Fall Apart. They say so much that you can relate to. And some of it so insightful that you cannot help but stop and think. Alas, Africa has had also the great misfortune of having many idiots and buffoons who unfortunately have gone on to occupy positions of power and authority. And if the truth be said, one of the reasons why Africa has faced so many trials and tribulations is because of the poor leadership. We really have had the misfortune of having buffoons and tyrants as leaders. For those of us in Zimbabwe, you will well remember the likes of Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Here is an individual who really learned nothing. All he cared about was power. And he was prepared to exercise power, and that's what he cared about. Zimbabwe in 1980 had the potential to become the South Korea of Africa. But alas, because of the poor leadership, that was not to be. We have instead become the North Korea of Africa, a failed state. And the nation is sunk deeper and deeper into the economic and political crisis. we see today. 45 years after independence, the country is yet to hold free, fair, and credible elections. All because we have tyrants that have ruled the country. The 1980 elections, although people had dreamed of one man, one vote, when Mugabe and his cronies signed at the Lancaster House talks that they would withdraw their operatives from the field during the elections. By the time they got back home, they decided otherwise. Many of the operatives were left in the field, and their instructions were simple. The people were told that if ZANU-PF does not win those elections, the Bush War would continue. The people voted to end the Bush War. And they thought ZANU-PF would be content with that. They were wrong. Because 3 years later, ZANU-PF launched the infamous Kukura-Hunde, whose primary purpose was to force the only other political party, PF SAPU, which posed a serious political challenge to ZANU-PF rule, to abandon its idea of being an independent party, forced them to sign the Unity Accord, which they finally signed in 1987, after the death of over 20,000 civilians. And that cleared the way for the regime to impose the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country to this day. It is a pity that the country has never recovered. The brutality of the 2008 election is another notable chapter in our history. In 2008, ZANU-PF had been put under enormous pressure by SADC to implement meaningful reforms to allow for free, fair, and credible elections. And the regime did. But as the results started coming out and it realized that it was losing the elections, it reverted to the violence. Here is Professor Ibo Mandaza describing what happened that year.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He phoned Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost the election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns. I was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. And then they contrived the runoff sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away, no? Yeah. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it. And the report is
The truth of the matter is the GNU of 2008 to 2013 offered the country the opportunity to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. And this analysis will be incomplete if one does not mention the fact that the MDC, CCC leaders have been on the political stage for 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU. They failed to implement even one token reform. This is the unfortunate reality of Zimbabwe. We have had a string of idiots and buffoons who have gone on to occupy high offices in the land. And we, all of us, have paid dearly for it. This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Still, I think as an African, one cannot help but be proud of individuals, great African sons and daughters of Africa, like Chinua Achebe, Nelson Mandela, and many, many others who have led Africa and shown the way that we as a people can still have leaders, insightful leaders. And if we can elect such people into positions of power and authority, Africa can be great again. And I think that is a truth that we should aspire for. As we go into the new year, I really believe that the people of Africa, the people of Zimbabwe, should be seriously looking back to the many opportunities we have wasted, and how we could have been different as a nation, and how we can still be different as a nation. Because we can change the present system, and we must change it. I seriously believe that Zimbabwe has suffered these last 45 years. And let's make sure that we do not repeat the same mistakes of the past. Let's learn from them and move on. Africa has shown that we have got leaders who have got a vision and who are competent. We need to look for them. And the idea that only ZANU-PF and Triple C leaders are the only leaders, I think is one of the failings of our time. We are failing to think outside the box. Africa has many leaders, great leaders. He has produced great sons and daughters. And I believe Zimbabwe, out of the 16 million or so people, I would like to believe that we have got at least leaders with some common sense. Just because these last 45 years we have had idiots and buffoons in power does not mean Zimbabwe does not have individuals with common sense. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.